Welcome back to the deep dive. We're here to get into the thick of complex topics and pull out what really matters for you.
And today, we're looking at something that sounds maybe a bit abstract, global trade policies.
Right, but how these big decisions, like tariffs, have very real, very immediate impacts on actual businesses, actual people's lives all over the world.
Yeah, the central question really is, what happens when a huge economy like the U.S. puts tariffs in place? How do those effects, those ripples, actually travel? Sometimes to places, you wouldn't even think of.
That's exactly what we want to unpack today. We're focusing on the recent U.S. tariffs on steel and aluminum, and specifically the major consequences for Indian foundries and the smaller businesses connected to them. We've got this detailed report from Al Jazeera we're going to dig into.
Our mission really is to pull out the key pieces, understand the complexities, and also hear some of the personal stories behind these big economic shifts.
We'll trace how these tariffs came about, hear directly from businesses in India feeling the pinch.
We'll also look at the bigger economic picture. Did these tariffs even do what they were supposed to do in the U.S.?
And explore what strategies these businesses might have, to try and navigate this really uncertain environment.
Okay, so where do we start?
Yeah.
To get the full picture, we probably need to go back a bit, right? See how this whole thing evolved.
Exactly. Let's set the stage. How did these tariffs begin?
Well, it kicked off back in 2018. This was during President Trump's first term.
Okay.
He imposed tariffs 25% on steel, 10% on aluminum.
And the justification was?
It was done under Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act of 1962. That's the bit that allows tariffs based on national security concerns.
Ah, the national security argument, often controversial in trade.
Very. And, initially, some businesses, they kind of managed because there weren't tariffs on finished products, just raw materials mostly.
Right, so you could import steel, make something, and export that without the tariff hitting the final product.
Exactly. But that didn't last.
So things escalated.
They did. Fast forward to February 10th, 2025. A big announcement. New 25% tariffs on steel and aluminum again.
Okay.
But this time, critically, they specifically included derivatives, so finished products, things made from steel and aluminum.
Ah, closing that loophole.
Right. And they also got rid of all the previous exemptions, so much harder to avoid.
That sounds like a major shift.
It was. And then, just a few months later, on June 4th, came another blow.
What happened then?
They announced the tariffs would be doubled to 50% on both steel and aluminum.
50%, wow.
Yeah. We heard from Aditya Garodia. He's the director of Corona's steel industry. He called it, and this is a direct quote, like a nail in a coffin.
A nail in a coffin. That's strong language. Why?
Because almost immediately, about 30% of his orders got canceled. He basically said, it is difficult for the market to absorb such high tariffs. You can see why.
Absolutely. 50% is huge. Was there anything else going on around then? Other tariffs?
Well, yeah. Around that time, on April 2nd, President Trump also announced something he called reciprocal tariffs.
Reciprocal, meaning?
Basically hitting back.
Yeah.
Tariffs on goods from India specifically set at 26% in response to India's own trade policies, presumably.
Okay, so targeted at India.
But then, just a week later, April 9th, that specific measure got put on hold for 90 days.
Put on hold? Why?
Seems like it was to create some space for negotiation. In the meantime, they introduced a kind of baseline 10% tariff for all countries, giving them, quote, breathing room to try and strike individual deals with the U.S.
Okay. So a very complex shifting picture on the policy front.
Definitely a real back and forth.
So let's bring this down to the ground now. We've talked about the policy changes, the percentages, but what did this actually mean for businesses in India? You mentioned Aditya Garodia.
Right. His company, Corona Steel, used to export over 100 different steel derivatives, things like fasteners, from his factory in West Bengal, mostly to the U.S.
And since the tariffs, what's his experience been like?
It's been rough. He said clients are really slow picking up orders now. Payments are getting delayed, like by a month on average.
Cash flow issues then.
Big time. And just generally, business is slowed right down. Customers are taking a wait-and-see approach. Understandable with this uncertainty.
And is he worried about competition too?
Yeah, he mentioned being concerned about domestic competition, specifically from cheaper Chinese products flooding the Indian market, potentially.
So pressure from multiple sides.
Exactly. And he's really just hoping India can negotiate lower tariffs somehow. That's the hope.
Let's put some numbers on this. How big is this trade flow we're talking about?
It's substantial. Last year, India exported about $4.56 billion worth of iron, steel, and aluminum products just to the U.S.
4.5 billion. Okay.
And when you drill down, it seems Indian foundries are particularly exposed.
Foundries. Tell us more about that sector.
Sure. India has around 5,000 foundries in total. About 400 of those cater to international markets, and maybe 100 focus exclusively on exports.
So a significant export base.
Definitely. Globally, Indian foundries export around $4 billion worth of goods, and the U.S. market. That counts for about $1.2 billion of that total.
Over $1 billion just to the U.S. And who are they competing against there?
In the U.S. market, they're up against local American foundries, naturally, but also major competitions from China and Turkey.
So it's already a competitive space before you even add tariffs.
Precisely.
And you mentioned earlier, it's often the smaller players who suffer most.
That's a key point here. More than 65% of these Indian foundries, and also the businesses that supply them with raw materials, they fall into the MSME category.
Micro, small, and medium enterprises.
Exactly. And the prediction is they will face the brunt of tariffs due to lower orders. That's according to Ravi Sehgal. He's the chairman of the National Center for Export Promotion, NCEP.
And did he give a sense of how high tariffs could go before it becomes unsustainable?
He did. He stated quite plainly that tariffs beyond, say, 10 to 14% would make it difficult for us to survive.
Difficult to survive. We're talking existential threats here for some.
For many, yes. It really goes beyond just business numbers. It hits people personally very hard.
Can you share some of those personal stories?
Yeah, the Al Jazeera report really highlighted a few. There's Sumit Agrawal. He's a 44-year-old manufacturer in Kolkata, making things like clamps and brackets.
Okay.
He said his business is hit hard. So hard, he's thinking about laying off maybe 30, even 40% of his workforce. He only has 15 employees.
Laying off nearly half his staff.
Because, in his words, orders have practically dried up.
Yeah.
The domestic market isn't strong enough to make up for that lost export business.
That's devastating for a small business owner.
It really is. And then there's Shyam Kumar Padar. He's 70, runs a small sheet metal fabrication unit, also in Kolkata.
What's his story?
It's quite poignant. Just 4 months before this really hit, he invested 800,000 rupees. That's about $9,400 in a new hydraulic press. He wanted to expand.
Investing in the future of his business.
Exactly. And now, he says he's had absolutely no orders for the past 2 months. Zero.
Oh, that's just brutal after making that investment.
Imagine. He depends heavily on exporters, you see. And like Sumit Agrawal, he mentioned the domestic market is just intensely competitive, so there's nowhere else to easily turn.
These stories really bring home the human cost behind the policy decisions.
They absolutely do. It's not just abstract economics. It's people's plans, their savings, their livelihoods, just thrown into chaos.
And it's not only the existing businesses feeling it, right? What about future plans, expansion?
That's affected too. Pradeep Kumar Madagaria from Yashi Castings, he mentioned that several foundry projects, especially ones that were geared towards exports, have basically been put on hold.
Deferred or just shelved completely?
Both. Because of all the uncertainty surrounding the U.S. market now, it puts a brake on investment and growth.
Okay, so the impact on the ground in India seems pretty clear and quite severe, especially for smaller players. Let's zoom out again. What about the U.S. side of the equation?
Right, the broader economic picture. Then this is where it gets, well, quite interesting. We heard from Ajay Shrivastava. He's the founder of the Global Trade Research Initiative, or GTRI.
Okay, GTRI. What's their take?
Well, Shrivastava argues that those higher tariffs, the ones imposed back in 2018, they actually failed to achieve their main stated goal, which was to revive the U.S. steel industry.
Failed? How can we tell?
Look at the numbers. Since those tariffs first came in, U.S. steel imports didn't go down. They actually increased.
Increased. Seriously.
Yeah, from about $98.6 billion up to $114 billion in 2024.
So the tariffs didn't cut imports. Did they boost U.S. production?
Shrivastava's observation is that they haven't cut imports or boosted production.
So why keep them if they're not working economically?
His take, they've mostly stuck around because they play well in politics.
The political angle. So good for rallying support, maybe, even if the economic results aren't there.
That seems to be the argument. It raises that question, doesn't it? Are these policies really about economic strategy, or are they more about political messaging, political leverage?
Especially given the lack of, tangible economic benefits shown so far. What about the impact within the U.S. for U.S. businesses and consumers?
Well, one direct consequence is that prices for steel and aluminum inside the U.S. are now much higher than they are in, say, Europe or China.
Okay, so domestic prices went up.
Which means things made with steel and aluminum in the U.S. cars, buildings, machinery, they become more expensive to produce.
Passing those costs potentially onto consumers or making U.S. manufacturers less competitive.
Could be both. It adds costs throughout the supply chain.
So given this whole picture, the impact in India, the questionable effectiveness in the U.S., what should India's strategy be?
Srivastava from GTRI argues India really needs a clear plan.
A plan for what?
To protect its trade interests, basically. Push hard for fair deals, but also, crucially, work on strengthening its own domestic manufacturing base. Build resilience.
Right, don't be quite so reliant on one or two volatile export markets. Makes sense. So, looking ahead now, what are the possible ways forward? Are there any solutions being floated?
Well, one strategy that came up is diversification.
Diversification, meaning finding other countries to sell to.
Yes, partly. Pankaj Chadha, who chairs the Engineering Export Promotion Council of India, EEPC, he suggested this.
What did he suggest specifically?
Exploring markets like Peru or Chile, but interestingly, not just as end markets.
Oh, how so?
The idea is that maybe Indian companies could export to Peru or Chile, and then those countries might export finished products onto the U.S., kind of finding a side door.
Like an intermediary step to bypass the direct U.S. tariffs?
Sort of, yeah. Because, as Chadha put it, it's just not possible to do business with such high tariffs directly with the U.S. right now.
That's a creative, if complicated, workaround. What about direct negotiations between India and the U.S.?
They're supposed to be ongoing. Remember that 90-day pause on the reciprocal tariffs?
Yeah, the one that started in April.
Right. That's expiring soon. Or may have already by the time people hear this. And as far as we know, India and the U.S. haven't finalized a new deal yet.
What's the Indian government saying?
Piyush Goyal, India's Minister of Trade and Industry, basically said India is ready to make a deal. But, quote, national interest will always be supreme. He emphasized they won't be rushed by deadlines. National interest comes first.
Okay, so standing firm on their position.
Seems so. It really highlights the tension, doesn't it? These big policy moves aiming to protect one nation's interests.
Yeah, but the immediate fallout lands so heavily on, often, the smallest businesses thousands of miles away.
Exactly. And circling back to Aditya Garodia, the steel derivatives exporter.
Yes. What's his final thought?
He's just really hoping a solution is found. And fast. He made a point about interdependence.
How so?
He argued no industry can survive in isolation. He pointed out the U.S. has its own issues, right? Like manpower shortages, higher production costs, raw material costs.
True.
And from his perspective, India offers a good alternative, a good substitute with cheap labor and low cost of production. He sees potential mutual benefit if they can sort out the trade terms.
A call for recognizing that interconnectedness.
I think so.
So wrapping this up, what's the core insight we should take away from this deep dive?
For me, it's how something that starts as, say, a national security measure, a tariff, it can unleash these incredibly complex, far-reaching ripples across the global economy.
Ripples that are often paradoxical, not always achieving the stated aim.
Right. And they hit particularly hard on those smaller, maybe less visible businesses that are actually, essential links in our global supply chains.
It really leaves us with a big question, doesn't it, for you listening in?
Yeah, how do countries actually balance their own national interests with this incredibly tangled web of global trade we all live in now?
And maybe what lessons can we learn from these specific stories, these Indian businesses, about what the real costs of protectionist policies actually look like on the ground?
What stands out to you about how all this played out? Something to think about.